At 10 p.m., my brother took my keys and the new car was wrecked. Enjoy my new story.
My brother Wesley crashed a brand new car at 4:47 on a Sunday morning. My father screamed at me for 20 minutes straight, called me selfish, called me vindictive, said I'd ruined the family with my attitude problem. But here's the thing that still makes me smile when I think about it now. It wasn't my Mazda CX-30 wrapped around that guardrail on Route 315. It was Dad's precious Cadillac Escalade, the $78,000 one he called his retirement gift to himself. And Wesley, he stole it thinking Dad would forgive him, just like Dad always forgave him, until the night he didn't. My name is Savannah Gilmore. I'm 29 years old, and until 4 months ago, I was the invisible daughter in a family that only had eyes for my younger brother. I grew up in Mountaintop, Pennsylvania, a small town about 15 minutes outside Wilkes Barre, where everybody knows everybody, and gossip travels faster than the speed of light. My father, Gerald Gilmore, built Gilmore Heating and Cooling from nothing, started in his garage when I was 3 years old, grew it into the biggest HVAC company in Luzerne County, 42 employees at its peak. He was proud of that business the way some men are proud of their children. Actually, scratch that. He was prouder of the business than he ever was of me. My mother, Diane, is what I'd call a professional peacekeeper. Her entire life philosophy can be summed up in 5 words. Let's not make waves. Whenever there was conflict, her solution was the same. Smile, nod, pretend everything is fine, and whatever you do, don't upset your father or your brother. Ah yes, my brother Wesley, the golden child, the favorite. The 26-year-old man who still brings his laundry to Mom's house every Sunday because, and I quote, her fabric softener smells better. I'm not saying Wesley is helpless, but last Thanksgiving he asked me how long to microwave ice for his drink. He wanted to microwave ice cubes because they weren't cold enough. I just stared at him for about 10 seconds, and then I poured myself more wine. Some questions don't deserve answers. Wesley has worked for Dad since he dropped out of community college at 19. I use the word worked loosely. He shows up around 10, takes 2-hour lunches, leaves by 4, and somehow still complains about being tired. Dad pays him $52,000 a year for this. I know because I accidentally saw his pay stub once when I was helping Mom with paperwork. Meanwhile, I worked my way up from bank teller to assistant manager at Landmark Credit Union over 7 years. And Dad has never once asked me about my job. Not once. But here's what really gets me. Over the past 4 years, Wesley has borrowed exactly $2,300 from me. $100 here, $300 there. Always with the same promise. I'll pay you back Tuesday, sis. Tuesday never comes. When I mentioned it to Dad once, just once, he looked at me like I'd suggested selling Wesley for medical experiments. Family doesn't keep score, Savannah. That's your problem. You're always keeping score. You know what Wesley keeps score of? His sneaker collection. The man has 34 pairs of shoes that cost more than my monthly car payment. But sure, Dad, I'm the one with the problem. 2 weeks before everything happened, I finally did something just for myself. I bought my first brand new car, a 2024 Mazda CX-30 in lunar silver. I'd been driving a 2009 Toyota Corolla with 187,000 miles on it. The AC hadn't worked in 3 years. The driver's side window got stuck if you rolled it down past halfway. Every time I turned left, it made a sound like a cat being stepped on. But I drove that car for 7 years because I was saving. $8,400 penny by penny, paycheck by paycheck, for a down payment on something that was actually mine. The day I drove that Mazda off the lot, I cried in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Not sad tears, happy tears. That car represented everything I'd built without anyone's help. No dad money, no family connections, just me, showing up every day, doing the work. Dad's reaction when I showed him, "A Mazda? Why didn't you get something American?" He said this while standing next to his $78,000 Escalade, the one he bought himself as a retirement gift, even though he wasn't retired and had no plans to retire. He just wanted a car that made other men feel small. That was Dad's whole personality in one vehicle. Shiny, oversized, and completely unnecessary. When Wesley turned 24, Dad bought him a Jeep Wrangler, paid for it outright. No loan, no payments, just handed him the keys with a big red bow like a car commercial. When I turned 24, Dad gave me a AAA membership, said it was more practical. I mean, he wasn't wrong. I used it 3 times that year when my Corolla broke down. But still, a Jeep versus roadside assistance. The math on that one speaks for itself. The weekend everything changed started like every other family dinner at my parents' house. Saturday evening, 6 o'clock, pot roast and passive aggression. I drove over in my beautiful new Mazda and parked it right behind Dad's Escalade in the driveway. That was my usual spot when I visited. Right behind Dad's car, like some kind of metaphor I didn't fully understand until later. I walked inside to find Mom frantically finishing the mashed potatoes because Wesley was late. Again. He finally rolled in 40 minutes after dinner was supposed to start. No apology, no explanation, just traffic was crazy, even though he lives 12 minutes away and there's never traffic in Mountaintop, because there's never anything happening in Mountaintop. Dad didn't say a word about Wesley being late. He just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "There's my boy. Grab a beer. Dinner's almost ready." If I'd been 40 minutes late, I would have gotten a lecture about respect and responsibility. Wesley got a cold Budweiser and a smile. During dinner, Wesley started talking about some business opportunity he was working on. A buddy of his had an idea for an app that would help people find parking spaces, except the app already exists, and it's called Google Maps. Dad nodded along like Wesley was pitching the next Amazon. "That's smart thinking, son. Real entrepreneurial spirit." I wanted to bang my head against the table. When there was finally a pause in the Wesley Appreciation Hour, I mentioned that I'd handled a complicated fraud case at work. A customer had been scammed out of $14,000, and I'd spent 3 weeks working with our fraud department to recover every penny. I was proud of it. It was genuinely difficult work, and I'd helped someone who really needed it. Dad's response, "That's nice, honey. Hey, Wesley, how's your golf game coming along? You still slicing on the back nine? That's nice, honey. 3 weeks of work, $14,000 recovered, and all I got was, 'That's nice, honey,' followed by a conversation about golf. I excused myself to help Mom with the dishes because I needed to put my hands in hot, soapy water before I put them around my brother's neck. That Saturday night, I made one tiny decision that changed everything. The weather forecast said rain was coming overnight, heavy rain, and my new Mazda was sitting in the driveway with no cover. My apartment complex in Kingston doesn't have covered parking, but my friend Colleen's building 3 blocks away does. She'd told me months ago I could use her extra spot whenever I needed to. So at 9 o'clock, I decided to move my car to Colleen's building, just to protect it from the storm. I grabbed my spare keys from my purse, moved the Mazda to Colleen's covered spot, and walked back to my parents' house to say goodbye. In my rush, I left my main car keys sitting on the kitchen counter. Didn't even think about it. I had my spare set. I'd grab the other keys tomorrow when I came by for Sunday brunch. No big deal, right? I said goodnight to Mom, waved vaguely toward the basement where Wesley had disappeared to sulk, and drove home in my little Honda Fit, a rental I had for the weekend while my apartment's parking situation was being sorted. Boring, unremarkable end to a boring, unremarkable family dinner. Except it wasn't the end at all, because in 12 hours, that small choice, protecting my car from a rainstorm, would expose 29 years of family lies and cost my father more than he ever thought his favorite son was worth. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see every single comment, and it honestly makes my day. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to that Saturday night. I need to back up a little and tell you about what happened at dinner that I glossed over, because there was a confrontation, and it matters. After the dishes were done, Wesley cornered me in the kitchen while Mom was in the bathroom and Dad was watching some golf tournament in the living room. He had that look on his face, the one he gets when he wants something and he's already decided he deserves it. His girlfriend, Megan, needed to be picked up from the airport the next morning. Her flight was landing at 10 a.m. at Philadelphia International, which is about a 2-hour drive from Mountaintop. Wesley's Jeep was making a weird noise, which I later found out meant he was almost out of gas and didn't want to pay for the drive to Philly and back. He wanted to borrow my car, my brand new Mazda, the car I'd owned for exactly 14 days. I said no. You have to understand, that was huge for me. I don't say no to Wesley. I never say no to Wesley. It's easier to just give in, let him have what he wants, avoid the explosion that comes when the golden child doesn't get his way. But something about that car, something about what it represented, made me plant my feet. I'm not comfortable lending it out, I told him. It's brand new. I've barely driven it myself. You can rent a car, or take an Uber, or maybe Megan can take an Uber from the airport like normal people do. Wesley's face did this thing, the shift from friendly to entitled to angry, all in about 2 seconds. I've seen that shift my whole life. It usually means I'm about to get yelled at, and then Dad is going to take his side, and then Mom is going to tell me I should have just been more flexible. Are you serious right now? Wesley said. It's one morning. I'll have it back by noon. No. Savannah, come on, don't be like this. Like what? Like someone who doesn't want to lend out her brand new car. That's pretty normal, Wesley. He made this scoffing sound, like I just said something ridiculous. It's not like I'm going to crash it. Famous last words. I mean, really. If I'd known what was coming, I would have had that moment tattooed on my brain in real time. It's not like I'm going to crash it. The universe heard that and started taking notes. Dad wandered in right then, probably sensing conflict like a shark senses blood, and Wesley immediately switched tactics. Dad, Savannah won't let me borrow her car to pick up Megan tomorrow. Can you talk to her? I watched my father's face, hoping, stupidly, pointlessly hoping, that just this once he'd take my side, that he'd say, Wesley, it's her car. Respect her decision. Instead, he looked at me with disappointment so thick you could spread it on toast. Savannah, don't be difficult. It's one morning. Help your brother out. Dad, it's my car. I said no. You're being petty, he said. This is exactly your problem. You're always making things harder than they need to be. My mother appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension, already wringing her hands. What's going on? Is everything okay? Savannah won't let Wesley borrow her car, Dad reported, like I'd committed some kind of crime. Mom looked at me with those pleading eyes. Honey, it would really help out. You know how Megan gets. Mom, I said no. That's my answer. No. Wesley threw his hands up. Fine, whatever. Be selfish. He stormed off to the basement, and I heard him slam the door so hard the pictures on the hallway wall rattled. Dad just shook his head at me. I don't know why you always have to be like this. Like what, Dad? Like someone with boundaries? See? That right there. That attitude. He walked back to his golf tournament, and I stood in the kitchen feeling like I was 12 years old again, getting blamed for something that wasn't my fault. My mother lingered because of course she did. She put her hand on my arm and whispered, Why do you always have to make things harder? You know how your father gets. You know how Wesley is. Would it have been so terrible to just say yes? Mom, it's my car. I know, honey. I know, but sometimes keeping the peace is more important than being right. I stared at her for a long moment. This was the woman who raised me, the woman who taught me to tie my shoes and make scrambled eggs and always say please and thank you. And she was telling me that keeping the peace with my entitled brother was more important than my own boundaries. I have to go, I said. I'm moving my car to Colleen's. It's going to rain tonight. That's when I left. That's when I moved my Mazda to covered parking. That's when I accidentally left my keys on the counter. At 10:17 p.m., I was in my apartment brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed with a text from Wesley. Changed my mind. Taking the car. You won't even notice. My heart dropped into my stomach. I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called Mom. Wesley took my car, I said, my voice shaking with anger. He took my keys and he took my car. Honey, calm down. He's home. I just saw him walk through the kitchen. Then why did he text me that he's taking my car? I'm sure it was just a joke. You know how he is. He's probably just trying to get a reaction out of you. Go to bed, Savannah. Everything's fine. I tried calling Wesley 3 more times. Nothing. I texted him. This isn't funny. Bring my car back. No response. But here's the thing I didn't know, what nobody knew. At 10:17 p.m., Wesley grabbed my keys from the counter, walked outside, and found nothing. My Mazda wasn't there. I'd moved it to Colleen's. His text to me was spite, pure childish spite. Taking the car when there was no car to take. A petty little power move to ruin my night. But Wesley didn't just go to bed and accept defeat. No. Wesley spent the next 5 hours drinking Dad's bourbon and spiraling into panic because Megan was texting him constantly. Her flight had been rescheduled, moved up, now landing at 5:30 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. She needed him there. She was testing him, though he didn't know that yet. And Wesley, drunk and desperate and completely incapable of accepting the word no, made a decision around 3 a.m. that would destroy everything. He walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer where Dad kept his spare keys, and grabbed the ones to the Escalade. In Wesley's bourbon-soaked brain, the logic was simple. Dad would understand. Dad always understood. Dad had been fixing Wesley's mistakes for 26 years. This would be no different. He climbed into that $78,000 Cadillac Escalade at 3:20 a.m., backed out of the driveway, and headed for Philadelphia. He never made it. I need to tell you something about Megan Kowalczyk before we go any further. She's 24, works as a dental hygienist in Scranton, and she'd been dating Wesley for about 14 months. She was also, by that point, completely fed up with him. Megan worked 40 hours a week cleaning people's teeth. She paid her own rent. She drove a 12-year-old Nissan Sentra with 140,000 miles on it because she was saving for nursing school. And she was dating a guy who worked maybe 20 hours a week, lived off his dad's money, and still asked her to split the check at dinner. She'd been dropping hints for months. Hints like, I don't know if this is working, and I need someone who's going to show up for me. Wesley, of course, heard none of it. Wesley heard what Wesley wanted to hear. So that Saturday, Megan decided to run a little test. She told Wesley her flight from visiting her sister in North Carolina had been rescheduled, moved up to 5:30 a.m. on Sunday. She needed him to pick her up at Philadelphia International Airport, a 2-hour drive away in the middle of the night. Here's the thing. Megan wasn't in North Carolina. There was no flight. She was at home in her apartment in Scranton, watching Netflix and waiting to see if Wesley would actually come through for her. Spoiler alert, he came through, just not in the way either of them expected. At 4:47 a.m., Wesley was driving too fast on Route 315 in the rain. His blood alcohol level was 0.11, over the legal limit of 0.08. Not blackout drunk, but impaired enough that his reflexes were slow and his judgment was worse than usual, which, for Wesley, is saying something. He lost control on a curve. The Escalade hit the guardrail at roughly 60 miles per hour, spun, hit it again, and came to rest in a ditch with the front end crumpled like aluminum foil. Wesley's injuries weren't life-threatening. Broken wrist, cuts from the shattered window glass, bruised ribs. He was conscious enough to try to restart the car, to try to drive away. His instinct, even then, was to flee, to avoid consequences, to make the problem disappear before anyone found out. But the Escalade wouldn't start, and another driver had witnessed the crash and was already calling 911. By 5:05 a.m., Pennsylvania State Police were on the scene. They smelled alcohol. They administered a field sobriety test. Wesley failed. They breathalyzed him, 0.11. They put him in handcuffs and arrested him right there on the side of Route 315, with the rain still falling, and Dad's $78,000 Escalade still smoking in the ditch. Here's what I love about state troopers. They don't care whose son you are. They don't care how much money your daddy has. They see a drunk driver who crashed a car and tried to flee, and they do their job. No favors, no phone calls to smooth things over. Just handcuffs and procedure. At 5:45 a.m., my phone rang. It was Dad, and he was screaming. What the hell did Wesley do to your car? I sat up in bed, heart pounding, completely confused. What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Savannah. The police just called. Wesley crashed your car on 315. He's in the hospital. Dad, that's not possible. My car is at Colleen's apartment. It's been there all night. Stop lying. They said he crashed a silver car. He took your car and he crashed it. Dad, listen to me. My car is not at your house. I moved it last night. Checked the driveway. There was a pause. Then I heard him moving. Heard the front door open. Heard his footsteps on the porch. Then silence. A very long silence. Dad, what do you see? His voice, when it came back, was different, smaller. The Escalade isn't here. What do you mean it isn't there? It's not here, Savannah. The Escalade. Oh my God. I'm not proud of this, but I smiled, right there in my dark bedroom at 5:45 in the morning, with my brother in the hospital and my father having a meltdown on the phone. I smiled because I knew before he said it. Wesley hadn't crashed my car. Wesley had crashed Dad's precious, beloved $78,000 Cadillac Escalade. The car Dad wouldn't let anyone else drive. The car he washed by hand every Sunday. The car he parked at the far end of every parking lot so no one would ding the doors. That car was now scattered across Route 315 in pieces. I got dressed and drove to Gazinger Medical Center. The whole way there, I kept waiting to feel bad, to feel scared for Wesley, to feel something other than this strange, calm satisfaction. But I didn't. For 29 years, I'd watched my brother skate through life on Dad's money and Dad's connections, and Dad's endless forgiveness. And now, finally, something had happened that Dad couldn't fix. The hospital was chaos. Mom was in the waiting room, crying. Dad was pacing, arguing with a state trooper who clearly didn't care about anything Dad had to say. And Wesley was in a hospital bed with a cast on his wrist, an IV in his arm, and a handcuff attaching him to the bed rail. Yes, a handcuff. My brother was under arrest. I walked in and Dad immediately turned on me. "This is your fault. If you had just let him borrow your car." "My car is fine," I said calmly. "My car is at Colleen's apartment. Wesley didn't take my car. He took yours." Dad stopped mid-sentence, blinked. "What?" "The keys I left on the counter were my keys, but Wesley didn't use my keys. He took your spare keys from the drawer, and he took your Escalade. The car he crashed is your Escalade, Dad, not my Mazda." I watched my father's face go through 7 different colors in about 10 seconds. Confusion, denial, realization, horror, more denial, anger, and finally, something I'd never seen on Gerald Gilmore's face before. Defeat. He looked at the state trooper. Is that true?" The trooper checked his notes. "The vehicle involved in the accident is registered to Gerald Gilmore, 2023 Cadillac Escalade. That's you, sir?" Dad nodded, unable to speak. "Your son was driving your vehicle while intoxicated, BAC of 0.11. He's being charged with DUI, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, damage to state property. That's the guardrail, and leaving the scene of an accident." "Leaving the scene? He didn't leave the scene. He's right here." "He attempted to flee, sir. Witnesses say he tried to restart the vehicle multiple times before we arrived. That's attempted flight. We take that seriously." Dad looked at Wesley. Wesley looked at the floor. And I looked at the state trooper's badge, memorizing the number, because I had a feeling I'd be sending that man a thank you card. For the first time in 29 years, my father couldn't buy Wesley out of trouble. He couldn't make a phone call to someone he knew. He couldn't write a check to make the problem disappear. His golden boy was handcuffed to a hospital bed with a felony charge, and there wasn't a single thing Gerald Gilmore could do about it. I didn't feel joy exactly, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt hope. Over the next 48 hours, I learned more about Pennsylvania criminal law than I ever wanted to know. Wesley wasn't facing one charge. He was facing 4. DUI with a high-rate BAC. That's when you blow between 0.10 and 0.16, which is worse than a regular DUI, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. And here's the kicker. When the vehicle is worth more than $2,000, that's a felony in the 3rd degree in Pennsylvania. Dad's Escalade was worth $78,000. So Wesley wasn't just in misdemeanor territory. He was looking at a felony. Then there was criminal mischief for the guardrail damage, $12,400 of state property that taxpayers would have to replace, and finally leaving the scene of an accident because he tried to restart the car and drive away before the police arrived. 4 charges, 1 felony, and a father who, for the first time in his life, couldn't write a check to make it all disappear. I watched Dad try, though. I'll give him that. The day after the accident, he called everyone he knew. His buddy on the township council, a guy he went to high school with who was now a local judge. Different jurisdiction couldn't help. His accountant, his lawyer, his insurance agent. He was making calls like a man trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with a coffee cup. But here's the thing about state troopers and state highways and state property damage. It's not local. Dad's connections in Mountaintop didn't mean anything to the Pennsylvania State Police. They didn't care that Gerald Gilmore sponsored the Little League team or donated to the volunteer fire department. They had a drunk driver, a totaled vehicle, a damaged guardrail, and witnesses. End of story. The insurance call was the one that really broke him. I happened to be at my parents' house when he made it. I'd come by to pick up some things, including my keys that were still sitting on the counter. And Dad was in his office with the door open. I could hear everything. Yes, I'm the policyholder, Gerald Gilmore. The vehicle is a 2023 Cadillac Escalade. Pause. Yes, that's correct. My son was driving. Longer pause. No, he's not listed on the policy. I watched his face through the doorway. I watched the exact moment he understood the trap he was in. Was he authorized to drive the vehicle? The claims adjuster asked. I could hear her tinny voice through the phone. Dad hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw him calculating. If he said yes, Wesley was authorized, insurance might cover the damage. But that would be a lie. Insurance fraud. A federal crime. Dad could go to prison. If he said no, Wesley wasn't authorized, the claim would be denied. $78,000 gone. But Dad would stay out of prison. For 26 years, my father had chosen Wesley over everything. Over me, over Mom, over common sense, over basic accountability. He had bailed Wesley out of every mess, paid off every problem, smoothed over every consequence until his precious son had never once faced the real world. And now, finally, he had to choose between Wesley and himself. No, Dad said quietly. He was not authorized to drive the vehicle. The claims adjuster's response was almost cheerful. I'm sorry, Mr. Gilmore, but unauthorized use by a family member with a BAC above the legal limit is excluded under Section 14 of your policy. We won't be able to process this claim. Is there anything else I can help you with today? She said it the same way you'd read a recipe for banana bread. Very calm, very pleasant. $78,000 gone. And she sounded like she was offering him a mint. Dad hung up without saying goodbye. He sat at his desk for about 10 minutes, not moving, just staring at the wall. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. 3 days after the accident, I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but I'm thorough. It's the credit union training. And something about Megan's story wasn't adding up. She needed to be picked up at 5:30 a.m. because her flight was rescheduled? From where? When I'd met her at family dinners, she'd mentioned her sister lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, so I checked the flight schedules. There was no 5:30 a.m. flight from Charlotte to Philadelphia that Sunday. There was no flight from Charlotte to Philadelphia that entire morning. I checked every airline. Nothing matched. I mentioned this to my mother first. She didn't want to hear it. Savannah, don't make things worse. Wesley has enough problems. Classic mom. So I told Wesley directly. He was out on bail by then. Dad had put up $15,000, and he was staying at my parents' house, moping around like a kicked dog. I found him in the kitchen, eating cereal at 2 in the afternoon. There was no flight, I said. What? Megan, her flight that was supposedly rescheduled to 5:30 a.m. It doesn't exist. There were no flights from Charlotte to Philadelphia that morning. I checked. Wesley's face went through several expressions. Confusion, doubt, then this horrible, dawning realization. She was testing you, I said. She made it up to see if you'd actually come through for her, and you came through. He put down his spoon, stared at the cereal. No, she wouldn't. Call her and ask. He did. Right there in the kitchen, hands shaking. He called Megan. I didn't stay to listen to the whole conversation. I didn't need to. I heard enough. Was there actually a flight? Silence. Then, are you serious right now? You made it up? This whole thing, you made it up. Megan broke up with him via text message that same afternoon. 47 words. I know because Wesley read it out loud to my mother while crying. I can't be with someone who commits felonies over a test. This isn't what I wanted. I think we both know this was coming. I wish you the best. Please don't contact me again. 47 words to end. 14 months. I'd say Wesley didn't deserve it, but honestly, Wesley probably did deserve it. Just not for the reasons Megan thought. But the worst was still coming. About 2 weeks after the accident, the local newspaper ran a story. Mountaintop man charged in DUI crash on Route 315. It wasn't front-page news or anything, just a small piece in the police blotter section, but it included Wesley's full name, and because reporters love context, it mentioned that he was the son of Gerald Gilmore, owner of Gilmore Heating and Cooling. That article was read by a man named Ray Pulaski. 2 years earlier, Wesley had been drinking at a bar in Wilkes-Barre. He'd driven home drunk. Shocking, I know. And on the way, he'd sideswiped a parked car in a restaurant parking lot. A nice car, a 2019 Lexus ES350 that belonged to Ray Pulaski. Ray had been inside the restaurant. He came out to find his car damaged and a very drunk Wesley Gilmore trying to drive away. He'd gotten Wesley's license plate. He'd called the police. And then my father had shown up. I didn't know any of this until later. None of us did except Dad and Wesley and apparently Mom, who didn't want to worry me. Dad had paid Ray Pulaski $4,500 in cash to drop the whole thing. No police report, no insurance claim, just a stack of bills and a handshake and a promise to make it all go away. But Ray Pulaski was smarter than my dad gave him credit for. He'd kept photos of the damage to his car. He'd kept a record of the cash payment. And this is the part that really matters. He'd secretly recorded his conversation with my father on his phone. In Pennsylvania, you only need one party's consent to record a conversation. Ray was that party. When Ray saw the newspaper article about Wesley's DUI, he saw an opportunity, not for money this time, for justice. He called the district attorney's office and told them everything. He sent them the photos. He sent them the recording. And suddenly, Wesley's case wasn't just about one drunk driving accident. It was about a pattern of behavior, a history of drunk driving, a history of being bailed out by Daddy. The prosecutor was very, very interested in that pattern. The insurance investigator called me about a week later. She was compiling a comprehensive report on the claim denial, and she wanted statements from family members. I told her the truth, all of it. The text message Wesley sent me, taking the car. You won't even notice. I gave her a screenshot. I told her about the years of borrowing my things, the entitlement, the pattern. When my father found out I'd cooperated with the investigation, he called me, not to yell, surprisingly. He just sounded tired. Why did you have to tell them all that? He's your brother. Because it's the truth, Dad. I'm done lying for him. I've been lying for this family my whole life. He hung up on me. But here's the thing. I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in 29 years, I didn't feel guilty for telling the truth about my own family. The insurance investigator's final report was 19 pages long. I know because my father threw it across the kitchen table at a family meeting 3 weeks later. Claim permanently denied. But the real damage was on page 14, where the investigator had noted that Wesley Gilmore had a documented pattern of unauthorized vehicle use and that previous incidents had been resolved through private financial settlements to avoid legal consequences. In other words, everyone now knew that Dad had been buying Wesley out of trouble for years. It was in writing. It was in an official report, and the district attorney had a copy. Wesley wasn't just facing a DUI anymore. He was facing the accumulated weight of every consequence he'd ever escaped. The court date was 4 months after the accident. 4 months of lawyers and motions and plea negotiations, and my father slowly losing his mind. Dad hired a defense attorney named Mitchell Kowalski. No relation to Megan, though the name similarity made for some awkward conversations. Mitchell cost $23,000 just as a retainer. He was supposed to be the best criminal defense lawyer in Luzerne County, but even he couldn't work miracles. The pattern evidence hurts, Mitchell told my parents at a meeting I wasn't supposed to attend but overheard anyway. The recording from 2 years ago really hurts. The guy your father paid off, Ray Pulaski, he's cooperating fully with the prosecution. He'll testify if it goes to trial. So what are we looking at? Dad asked. If we go to trial and lose, 18 to 36 months probably, multiple felony convictions. He'd be a convicted felon for life. And if we don't go to trial, we negotiate. He pleads guilty to reduced charges. The DA has offered DUI, high rate unauthorized use, still a felony but dropped to theft by unlawful taking, and criminal mischief. They'll drop the leaving the scene charge in exchange for the guilty plea. Recommended sentence is 12 to 18 months in county, 5 years probation, full restitution. My mother started crying. My father just nodded slowly, like a man accepting a terminal diagnosis. Wesley pleaded guilty. Sentencing day was on a Tuesday in October. Luzerne County Courthouse, a big stone building in downtown Wilkes-Barre that looks exactly like you'd expect a courthouse to look, serious and cold and utterly indifferent to your problems. I went. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe I needed to see it happen. Maybe I needed to know it was real. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Dark wood, fluorescent lights, that specific institutional smell that all government buildings seem to have. Wesley sat at the defense table in a suit that didn't fit quite right. He'd lost weight from stress. Dad sat in the gallery behind him. Mom sat next to Dad, clutching a tissue. I sat in the back row, alone. Judge Eleanor Brennan presided. She was in her early 60s. Silver hair, glasses, a face that suggested she'd seen every excuse in the book and wasn't interested in hearing any new ones. The prosecutor presented the case, the DUI, the felony theft, the property damage, the blood alcohol level, the pattern of behavior, previous incident, cash payment, recorded conversation. He played the recording for the court. I heard my father's voice offering Ray Pulaski money to make this whole thing go away. Dad stared at the floor while it played. Mitchell did his best for Wesley. First official offense, he argued. Young man from a good family, strong support system, potential for rehabilitation. He talked about Wesley's childhood, his struggle to find his path, his genuine remorse. Judge Brennan listened to all of it with the same expression. Then she looked directly at Wesley. "Mr. Gilmore, please stand." Wesley stood. Even from the back of the room, I could see his hands shaking. "I've reviewed your case thoroughly," the judge said. "I've read the pre-sentencing report, I've listened to the arguments from both sides, and what strikes me isn't the accident itself. Accidents happen. People make mistakes. What strikes me is the pattern." She paused, looking at some papers in front of her. "Every time you've faced consequences in your life, someone has removed them. A check written, a problem solved, a lesson never learned. Your father paid $4,500 to cover up a previous drunk driving incident. Your family enabled behavior that put other people's lives at risk, and now here we are." Wesley swallowed hard. "The purpose of this court is not punishment for punishment's sake. It's accountability, something you have apparently never experienced. It's also protection of the public from individuals who have demonstrated a pattern of dangerous behavior." She straightened her papers. "Wesley Brian Gilmore, I hereby sentence you to 18 months in Luzerne County Correctional Facility. Upon release, you will serve 5 years of probation with standard conditions. Your driver's license is suspended for 5 years. You are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $12,400 for the guardrail damage and $78,000 for the vehicle you destroyed. You will complete a substance abuse program while incarcerated." She looked at him one more time. "You are 26 years old, Mr. Gilmore, young enough to turn your life around. I hope you use this time wisely. This court is adjourned." The bailiff approached Wesley. He was a big guy, probably done this 10,000 times, very calm and professional about the whole thing. He told Wesley to put his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut. "Watch your step," he said as they headed toward the side door. I thought, that's probably the first piece of practical advice Wesley has ever received that he couldn't ignore or argue with. Wesley looked over his shoulder at Dad one last time. Dad didn't move, didn't wave, didn't mouth, "I love you," or "be strong," or anything. He just sat there, frozen, staring at his son being led away in handcuffs. And then Wesley was gone through a side door, and it was over. I stayed in my seat for a few minutes while the courtroom cleared. Mom was sobbing into Dad's shoulder. Dad was patting her back mechanically, but his eyes were empty. Eventually, they walked out without seeing me, or at least without acknowledging me. I sat there thinking about accountability, about how Wesley had lived 26 years without it, and now he was getting 18 months of it all at once. I thought about Dad, who had spent decades protecting Wesley from consequences and was now drowning in the consequences himself. $78,000 for the car, $23,000 for the lawyer, $12,000 in restitution, $15,000 in bail that he'd lose because Wesley violated the terms by contacting Megan, lost business contracts because of the newspaper article, damaged reputation. The golden child had cost my father more than he ever imagined. And me? I drove home in my beautiful, untouched, paid-for Mazda CX-30, the car that started all of this, the car Wesley thought he was going to steal that night, the car that was safe in a covered parking spot because I'd wanted to protect it from the rain. I didn't feel joy, exactly. I didn't feel revenge. I just felt clear. Like finally, after 29 years, the math made sense, real quick. If this story has you hooked, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It honestly means the world to me and helps more people find these stories. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, let me tell you how this all ended. It's been 4 months since the sentencing. 4 months since I watched my brother get handcuffed in a courtroom and led away to serve 18 months for stealing a car he thought would be easily forgiven. My life looks completely different now. I got the promotion. The branch manager position at Landmark Credit Union that I'd been passed over for twice finally became mine. The guy who got it instead of me, the one with 2 years less experience, he quit after 3 months. Couldn't handle the responsibility. Turns out showing up and working hard actually matters. Who knew? The position came with a $14,000 raise and an office with a window. My name is on the door. It's small, but it's mine. I moved too. Found a nicer apartment in 40 Fort, about 15 minutes from work. It has actual closet space, a dishwasher that works, and, most importantly, covered parking. My Mazda sits under a roof every single night. Some habits you don't break. I started dating someone. His name is Patrick Nowak, and he's a high school history teacher at Coughlin High School in Wilkes-Barre. He drives a Subaru Forester with a Support Your Local Library bumper sticker. He thinks the entire Gilmore family saga is, and I quote, absolutely bananas. He's not wrong. Patrick asked me once if my family was always this dramatic. I told him, honey, this is the calm version. You should have seen Christmas 2021 when Wesley brought a girlfriend named Destiny, who turned out to be engaged to someone else. There was a screaming match on the front porch. Destiny left in an Uber eating our leftover pumpkin pie. She took the whole pie, didn't even leave a slice. Patrick just stared at me for a second, then said, I'm going to need you to write all of this down because I don't think I'll believe it later. I told him the pie was really good too. Homemade, Mom's recipe. Wesley is about 4 months into his sentence now. I visited him once about 6 weeks in. I'm not sure why I went. Maybe I needed to see him in that place. Maybe I needed him to see me living my life, doing fine without him or anyone else dragging me down. The visitation room at Luzerne County Correctional is exactly as depressing as you'd imagine. Plastic chairs, vending machines with off-brand snacks, fluorescent lights that make everyone look slightly ill. Wesley was thinner than I'd ever seen him. His hair was shorter. He had this look in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Not anger, not self-pity, just blankness. We talked for about 40 minutes. He didn't blame me, didn't ask for money, didn't make excuses. He just said, I don't know who I am when nobody's cleaning up after me. I guess I'm figuring it out. I didn't have a response to that. What do you say? Good luck? I hope you figure it out. I just told him I'd visit again if he wanted. He said he'd like that. I haven't gone back yet. I'm not sure I will. Dad sold Gilmore Heating and Cooling about 6 weeks ago. He couldn't sustain the business after everything that happened. Between the lost contracts, the legal fees, the restitution payments, and the reputation damage, it just wasn't viable anymore. A company from Scranton bought the name and the client list. Dad got enough to pay off his debts and have a little left over, but not much. The man who used to brag about building an empire from his garage now works as an HVAC consultant for a company in Hazleton. $28 an hour, no employees, no prestige, no Escalade. He drives a 2018 Buick Envision now, bought it used from a dealership in Scranton. It's a perfectly fine car, reliable, practical, exactly the kind of car he used to mock me for driving. The universe really does have a sense of humor. Dad and I have dinner sometimes. Not often. Maybe once a month. He's different now. Quieter. He asks about my job and actually listens to the answers. He hasn't apologized for anything directly. I don't think he knows how. But last month, he said something that stopped me cold. You were right to say no that night. About the car. You were right. From Gerald Gilmore, that's practically a Hallmark movie confession. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and changed the subject. Some acknowledgments don't need a response. Mom got a job, her first one in over 30 years. She works the front desk at a dental practice in Kingston 3 days a week. She answers phones, schedules appointments, greets patients. She's 58 years old and she says it's the best decision she's ever made. Last week, she told Wesley during a phone call from the facility that she couldn't put money in his commissary account every week anymore. He needed to learn to budget with what he earned from his prison job. He makes about 37 cents an hour working in the facility laundry. Mom told him that was more than enough for soap and ramen if he was careful. Baby steps, but steps. Wesley writes me letters sometimes, actual handwritten letters, because email isn't really a thing in county lockup. His handwriting is terrible, like a doctor who's also having an earthquake, but I can usually make out the words. In his last letter, he told me he'd become strategic about commissary purchases. The prison commissary sells ramen for $1.25 a pack. Wesley, who used to complain that Whole Foods was too basic, now trades work shifts for extra seasoning packets. I'm not saying incarceration changed his perspective on money, but apparently he's become very tactical about his soup investments. Never thought I'd see the day. The $2,300 Wesley owed me? About 2 months after the sentencing, a check arrived in my mailbox. $2,300 exactly. The memo line said, "From Wesley's share, Dad." No note, no explanation, no apology. I deposited it without guilt. It was always my money anyway. I'd just been waiting for someone to acknowledge that. Every morning I drive to work on Route 315. It's the most direct route from my apartment to the credit union. And every morning I pass the exact spot where Wesley crashed the Escalade. The guardrail has been replaced, fresh metal, no scratches, no signs of impact. You'd never know anything happened there. But I know, every single day I drive past in my untouched, beautiful, hard-earned Mazda CX-30, the car Wesley intended to steal that night, the car that survived because I moved it 3 blocks away to protect it from rain, the car that represents everything I built without anyone's help. I spent my whole life being told I was too sensitive, too difficult, too rigid with my boundaries. Turns out I wasn't too anything. I was just surrounded by people who'd never been told no. The moment I stopped being their safety net, reality became their teacher. And reality is a much harsher teacher than I ever was. I didn't destroy my brother. I didn't plot revenge. I didn't scheme or manipulate or plan his downfall. I just stopped protecting him from himself. I held a boundary. I said no. And then I stepped back and let consequences happen naturally. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for karma. I learned that karma doesn't need your help. It just needs you to get out of the way. My brother is serving 18 months because he couldn't accept the word no. My father lost his business and his pride because he spent 30 years saying yes to the wrong person. And me, I'm exactly where I always should have been. In my own car, on my own road, going exactly where I want to go. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's just a longer fall. Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end. If this story resonated with you, there's another one waiting right on your screen. I think you're really going to love it. And remember, your boundaries aren't selfish. They're survival.